She walked into that building on a Tuesday morning with a sick baby pressed against her chest, a completed proposal already submitted, and 4 years of silence sitting heavy in her throat. She had done everything right, every single thing, and they were still going to throw her out. But here is what nobody in that building understood yet. The young black woman they were about to humiliate in front of her colleagues, the one they had already decided didn't belong there, she was the only reason that building still had a future. And by the end of that day, every single person who had looked through her was going to have to reckon with exactly what they had chosen not to see. Stay with me, because this story starts with a mother trying to save her son, and it ends with something so much larger, so much darker, and so much more powerful than anyone expected, including her. It was 5:47 in the morning when Maya Vance's alarm went off. Not that she needed it. She had been awake since 3 a.m., sitting at her kitchen table in a small apartment on the south side of Chicago, finishing a 200-page structural design proposal that she had been building for 6 weeks. She submitted it at 4:43 a.m. Then she cleaned the kitchen. Then she started Marcus's breakfast. Maya Vance was 23 years old, and she had already survived more than most people face in an entire lifetime. She had a secret marriage to a man who had stopped coming home, a 4-year-old son she had raised almost entirely alone, a career she had built from scratch at Sterling Tech, the most powerful technology and construction conglomerate in North America, and a secret she carried with her every single day, a secret that could have changed everything, that could have opened every door, that could have made every one of these mornings easier. She had chosen not to use it. Not because she was naive, not because she was weak, but because Maya Vance needed to know, needed to prove to herself beyond any shadow of doubt that everything she had was hers, earned, built with her own hands. In the stolen hours before the rest of the world woke up, she was standing at the stove making oatmeal when she heard it, the cough. Small, wet, wrong. She crossed the apartment in 4 steps. Marcus was in his bed, eyes glassy, cheeks flushed in a way that made her stomach drop before she even reached for the thermometer. 103.2 degrees. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead and felt the heat radiating up through her palm. She called Jinho's number. 6 rings. Voicemail. She called again. 6 rings. Voicemail. She stood in that small bedroom in the blue pre-dawn light, holding the phone, and she was not surprised. She hadn't been surprised by Jinho's absence in years. That didn't make it hurt less. It had just become a different kind of pain, the kind you learn to carry without dropping anything else. She wrapped Marcus in his warmest blanket. She packed his little bag with his medicine and his favourite stuffed bear. She put her work bag over one shoulder and her son over the other. And she walked out the door into the November morning. In 4 years of marriage, secret, invisible, unacknowledged marriage, Jinho Sterling had never once answered the phone when it truly mattered. Maya had stopped being surprised. She had not stopped being heartbroken. Those are 2 very different things, and it matters to understand the distinction, because one of them makes you numb, and the other one keeps you human. Maya Vance had stayed human, and on this particular Tuesday morning, that humanity was about to become the most powerful force in a 47-story building full of people who had forgotten how to feel anything at all. Sterling Tech headquarters rose out of the Chicago skyline like something designed to make ordinary people feel small. Glass and steel and the kind of architectural arrogance that announces its own importance before you even reach the revolving doors. Maya had walked through those doors every morning for 3 years. She had never once felt small inside them. She had simply felt tired of having to prove she belonged there. She walked in that morning with Marcus pressed against her chest, his small head resting on her shoulder, his breathing shallow and laboured. The lobby went quiet, in that particular way that lobbies go quiet when something unexpected arrives. People stared. Some whispered. A woman near the elevator actually took a step back, as if sickness was something that announced itself with social impropriety rather than biology. Maya kept her head up. She walked to her desk. She sat down. She opened her laptop with one hand while holding Marcus steady with the other. Her proposal was already submitted. Her morning's work was already done. She simply needed somewhere warm to sit with her sick child until she could figure out next steps. She had been at her desk for 11 minutes when Secretary Park arrived. Secretary Park was Jin-Ho Sterling's gatekeeper, enforcer, and primary weapon against anyone he found inconvenient. She was 35 years old, precise in everything she wore and said, and she had built her entire professional identity around her proximity to power. She spotted Maya and Marcus from across the open floor plan, and she walked over with the specific kind of purposefulness that people deploy when they have already decided what they are going to do, and simply need to perform the decision. She dropped the suspension notice on Maya's desk. 2 weeks, unpaid, effective immediately. Conduct unbecoming of a Sterling Tech employee. Maya looked at the notice. She looked at Secretary Park. She explained, quietly and clearly, that her proposal had been submitted at 4:43 that morning. She asked, specifically, what conduct was being cited. Secretary Park told her, loudly enough for the entire floor to hear, that bringing a sick child into the workplace constituted a health hazard, that it was disruptive, that it was unprofessional, that security would escort her out if necessary. The office was watching. Nobody said anything. Nobody pushed back. Nobody pointed out that Maya's work was already done, that Marcus was quiet and still, that the woman holding him had submitted more work by 5 a.m. than most of the floor would produce that entire week. Marcus whimpered softly against Maya's shoulder, and something shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet, final, irreversible shift in the interior landscape of a woman who had been absorbing the weight of other people's choices for 4 years. It felt less like breaking and more like something snapping back into its correct position after being bent wrong for too long. She did not walk toward the exit. She walked toward the elevator. She pressed the button for the 72nd floor, the chairman's floor, the floor that required appointments and clearances and the kind of institutional permission that had always been used to keep certain people in certain places. Maya Vance had every right to be on that floor. She had just never exercised it. Until now. The 72nd floor reacted to Maya's arrival the way powerful places always react to the unexpected, with a combination of protocol and panic. Assistants stepped forward, security moved, voices were raised. Maya walked through all of it, with Marcus on her hip and 4 years of suppressed truth in her chest, and she did not stop walking until she reached the door of Chairman Eleanor Sterling's office. She pushed it open. Chairman Eleanor Sterling had run the most powerful company in North America for 30 years. She had started it from nothing with her late husband, built it through 3 recessions, 2 industry collapses, and more boardroom wars than most people read about in business school. She was 62 years old, and she had the particular stillness of someone who had long ago stopped being surprised by anything. She looked up from her desk. She looked at Maya. She looked at Marcus. And she waited. Maya told her everything. Her name, the marriage, the certificate, 4 years, the unanswered calls, Marcus's fever, the suspension notice. She said it all clearly and directly and without performing any of the emotions she was actually feeling, because she had learned a long time ago that rooms full of powerful people respond to clarity, not tears. Marcus looked at the elegant, silver-haired woman across the room with the wide, unself-conscious honesty of a 4-year-old and said, quietly, "Are you my grandma?" Chairman Eleanor Sterling, iron for 60 years, unshakable through 3 decades of corporate warfare, went completely still. That was the moment. Not the documents, not the confrontation that came later, not the boardroom or the will or the shareholders' meeting. That small voice asking that simple question. That was the crack in the wall. And everything that came after it poured through that crack. But before the warmth could settle, before anything could be processed or decided, the office door opened again, and Jin-Ho Sterling walked in. He was 28 years old and looked like exactly what he was, a man accustomed to controlling every room he entered. He was handsome in the cold, composed way of people who have learned to use their appearance as another instrument of power. He took in Maya. He took in Marcus, and his jaw tightened in a way that was almost imperceptible and entirely revealing. He called it a scene. He said Maya had come to embarrass him. He said the child could be anyone's. From the corner of the room, in a small voice that carried more weight than anything else spoken on that floor that day, Marcus said, "Daddy?" Jin-Ho Sterling heard his son's voice say that word for what may have been the first time in a context where he could not deny it. And he looked away. That deliberate, chosen act of looking away from your own child's face, that was the first dark truth this story had to tell. And it was not the last. To understand what happened next, you have to go back 5 years, because nothing about Jin-Ho Sterling's pursuit of Maya Vance was accidental, and nothing about what he did afterward was impulsive. Every step was calculated, which makes it so much worse. 5 years ago, Maya was 18 years old and presenting her senior thesis at the university's annual engineering symposium. The auditorium was full. She was the only undergraduate presenting work at a postgraduate level. She stood at that podium and explained load-bearing acoustic architecture in a way that made 3 tenured professors sit up straighter in their chairs. Jin-Ho was in the back of the room. He had not come for the symposium. He had come because someone had told him that Professor Arthur Vance's daughter, his only student, his singular academic legacy, would be presenting. Jin-Ho was at a critical juncture in his relationship with his grandmother. He needed her to hand him the CEO position before her health declined further. She would do it, but only if he demonstrated intellectual credibility. Only if he could produce work that proved he deserved the role, rather than simply inheriting it. He needed a thesis that would win the National Engineering Award. He needed a validator. He needed Professor Arthur Vance. And he believed that Maya was the door to that validation. He pursued her for 8 months. Flowers left on her research desk, walking her home in the rain, late-night conversations about architecture and ambition that felt, to Maya, like finally being seen by someone who understood the interior of her mind. He was patient and precise and completely convincing. And Maya, who had spent her entire life being told she was too much, too focused, too intense, too serious, had never been looked at the way Jin-Ho looked at her. She didn't know she was being studied. She thought she was being loved. When she told him she was pregnant, he married her within the week. Quietly, he said, just until things settle. A secret marriage, he said, for protection, for time. What he did not tell her was that by the time she told him about the pregnancy, he had already gotten everything he needed. Professor Vance's private endorsement of his thesis, the national award, the CEO position secured. Maya had served her purpose in his plan before Marcus was even born. The secret marriage was not protection, it was containment. A way to keep her quiet and close without giving her anything that would make her difficult to manage later. Maya found out the truth 6 months before that Tuesday morning. Not dramatically, not in a single revelatory moment, but gradually, the way you piece together a picture you didn't know you were looking at. A document left open on a shared laptop, a name in an email chain that didn't belong, a conversation she wasn't supposed to overhear. She had spent 6 months waiting for Jin-Ho to tell her himself, to choose honesty, to choose differently. He never did. Back in Chairman Sterling's office, sitting across from a woman who had built an empire, Maya told all of this without flinching. And when she was done, Chairman Sterling was quiet for a long time. Then she pulled out a file, thick, tabbed, organized with the methodical precision of someone who had been building a case, not discovering one. She slid it across the desk to Maya, and the story got darker. What was inside that file was not simply evidence of a bad husband or a manipulative man. What was inside that file was evidence of something that had been 2 years in the making. Evidence that Jin-Ho Sterling had been systematically and deliberately working to strip Sterling Tech's most valuable intellectual property, its core architectural technology patents, and transfer them to a private shell company that he controlled independently. Separately from Sterling Tech, separately from his grandmother, without the knowledge or consent of a single board member. The plan was sophisticated, and it was patient. He had spent 2 years quietly repositioning assets, moving licensing agreements, restructuring subsidiary relationships in ways that individually looked like routine corporate maintenance and collectively represented the gutting of everything his grandmother had built. He needed one final piece: a technical validation report signed by someone with an unimpeachable reputation, someone whose name alone would make any board or regulatory body accept the legitimacy of the intellectual property transfer without question, someone no one would challenge. He needed Dr. Arthur Vance, and he had believed, with the particular arrogance of someone who has always gotten what he wanted, that Maya was his path to that signature. He had gone to Dr. Vance twice directly. Twice Dr. Vance had refused. Something about the requests had felt wrong to him, too vague, too structured around legitimacy rather than substance. He had said no both times without being able to articulate exactly why. Without that signature, Jin Ho's timeline collapsed. He had been improvising ever since, getting more desperate, more reckless. And with the shareholders' meeting now 12 days away, a meeting at which he planned to announce a partnership with Cho Group that would give him majority share control and the legal mechanism to complete the asset transfer, he was running out of room. Maya sat with all of this information in her hands and felt something she had not expected to feel. Not rage, not vindication. Something quieter and more devastating. The confirmation of a thing she had half known and fully refused to believe. That she had never been loved. She had been useful. And the moment she stopped being useful, she had been managed. And the moment she became inconvenient, she had been erased. She had given that man 4 years and a child, and every compromise her pride had cost her. And he had looked at all of it and seen a resource. The next morning, Jin Ho moved with the swiftness of someone who understood that the clock was running. A magazine interview appeared online with a photograph of Jin Ho and Vivian Cho, a 26-year-old Korean-American socialite whose family controlled Cho Group's North American assets. The headline confirmed an exclusive relationship. 3 months, the article said. The implication was clear and deliberate. Maya was nobody. Marcus was nothing. There was no secret marriage. There was only a disturbed woman who had made a scene and been escorted from the building. The office buzzed with it. Colleagues who had brought Maya coffee the morning before suddenly couldn't meet her eyes. The same people who had watched Secretary Park throw her out without a word of objection were now nodding sagely at their phones, reassured by the official narrative. Maya read the article at her desk, reinstated overnight by Chairman Sterling's direct order. An order Secretary Park had received at 6 a.m. with no further explanation. And she felt, looking at that photograph, something clarify inside her. Not anger, clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop hoping someone will choose to be better and simply accept who they have chosen to be. She had one move to make before the shareholders' meeting, and it required a phone call she had been avoiding for 4 years. She went to the rooftop at dusk. She stood with the city spread below her, all lights and distance, and the particular loneliness of someone who has been in a crowd their entire adult life and never once felt found. She dialed the number. 2 rings. Dr. Arthur Vance answered on the second ring. His voice was careful and warm, in the specific way of a parent who has been waiting for a call they were afraid to ask for. Maya talked for 40 minutes. She told him everything. The marriage, Marcus, Jin Ho's real reason for pursuing her, the file, the shell company, the asset transfer plan, the 2 visits to his office and the requests he had refused without being able to name why. She told him about Marcus's eyes, that they were his. Dr. Vance was quiet for a long time after she finished. Then he said, "I have a grandson." It was not a question. It was a man recalibrating his entire understanding of the last 4 years in real time. Maya said, "His name is Marcus. He's 4. He has your eyes." Dr. Vance said, "Tell me what you need." 3 people were now aligned. A grandmother who had built an empire, a wife who had survived it, and a father who had been waiting, without knowing he was waiting, for his daughter to need him in a way he could actually answer. For the next 10 days, Maya worked. She worked in the way she had always worked. Quietly, completely. with the kind of focus that only comes from having something real at stake. She worked at Sterling Tech during the day, managing her design department, staying ahead of every deadline, giving no one anything to point to. She worked at night after Marcus was asleep, at the kitchen table with her father on a video call, reviewing every page of what she had built. The Horizon Protocol was what she called it. 8 months in the making, conceived in the 4 a.m. hours when Marcus was sleeping and the apartment was silent, and the only thing standing between Maya and despair was the work itself. It was a complete restructuring framework for Sterling Tech's next decade, a new technology division, a proprietary structural modelling system, a development pipeline that would make the company's current intellectual property look like a rough draft. It was not a response to Jin Ho's scheme. She had started building it long before she found the file. She had built it because she saw something in the company's architecture that everyone else had missed. Because that was what Maya Vance did. She saw what other people couldn't. Dr. Vance reviewed every page. Then he reviewed it again. On the 8th day, he called her at 4 a.m. She was already awake. And he said simply, "This is the best work I have seen in 40 years. Not from a student. From anyone." She had needed to hear that from him, specifically because he was the one person in the world she trusted to tell her the truth. Not because he was her father. Because he was the standard. Chairman Sterling reviewed the legal framework. Her attorneys built the board presentation structure. And Vivian Cho, who had spent a week making phone calls of her own after a 2-hour conversation with Maya in a Sterling Tech conference room, had gathered documented testimony from 7 different board members. 7 people who had each been privately promised something different by Jin Ho Sterling about what this Cho Group partnership would mean for their shares. 7 contradictory promises, all documented, all dated, all signed. Vivian Cho had walked into that conference room prepared to defend Jin Ho Sterling, and had walked out with a USB drive and a much clearer picture of the man she had been standing beside. Maya had not manipulated her, had not strategized, had simply told her the truth and placed the documents in front of her and let her draw her own conclusions. Because that was the only kind of alliance Maya was willing to build. One based on what was actually real. Jin Ho, meanwhile, was accelerating. He had received intelligence that Maya was meeting privately with his grandmother. He had made calls, issued instructions, tried to get the paternity test results suppressed, results that had come back confirming what he had actually known since the day Marcus was born. Since the private test he had ordered in secret 4 years ago. Since the moment he had looked at the result and made the deliberate choice to behave as though he had never seen it. He had known his son's face from the first photograph Maya had sent him. The one he never responded to. He had looked at proof of his own child and chosen, deliberately, to pretend otherwise. That was not ambition. That was not strategy. That was a choice about what kind of person he was going to be. And he had made it. Every single day for 4 years. That was the darkest truth in this story. Not the corporate theft. Not the manipulation. Not the secret marriage or the public erasure. The darkest truth was that Jin Ho Sterling had known he had a son, had held the proof in his hands, and had chosen to look away. Marcus was discharged from the hospital on the morning of the shareholders' meeting. His fever had finally broken on the 4th day. He was pale and quieter than usual, and he held Maya's hand with both of his as they walked out through the hospital doors into the cold morning air. She had worked through every night of his hospitalization, sitting in the chair beside his bed with her laptop open and the hospital's blue-white light falling across the pages of the Horizon Protocol. Marcus would wake sometimes and find her there and simply go back to sleep, reassured by her presence in the way that children are reassured by their primary person simply existing in the same room. She had finished the final page at 4 a.m. on the morning he was discharged. She had closed her laptop, crossed the room, and pressed her forehead against his sleeping one for a long time. By 9 a.m. she was in the elevator to the 72nd floor. The boardroom was full. 16 directors, 3 senior partners, legal teams. Jin-ho at the head of the table in a dark suit, composed and commanding, exactly as he had planned to appear. Vivian Cho seated beside him, perfectly dressed, expression entirely unreadable to anyone who didn't know what was coming, which was everyone in that room except two people. Jin-ho began with the presentation he had spent 2 years constructing, the Cho Group partnership, the investment figures, the projected share value increase, the language of transformation and growth and strategic vision. He was good at this. He had always been good at the performance of authority. The boardroom listened with the attentive deference of people who have been conditioned to believe that the loudest voice in the room is the most credible one. The doors opened. Maya walked in. The room shifted in the way rooms shift when someone enters who changes the air. Jin-ho's composure held, but his eyes hardened. He said this meeting was for board members only. Chairman Sterling said, from her seat at the table, that Maya was there at her invitation. She told her grandson to sit down. He started to respond. She said it again. He sat. Vivian Cho stood up. She told the board that Cho Group was withdrawing its offer of partnership. Effective immediately. She told them why. The secret marriage Jin-ho had hidden from her. The shell company she had discovered. The 7 contradictory promises. She named the board members. She named the dates. She named the figures. Each one contradicting the next. She placed the USB drive on the table. She said she had been almost the next woman he used, and that she was choosing not to be. She looked briefly at Maya when she said it. Not with warmth, exactly, but with a particular respect of one person recognizing the integrity of another. Then she sat down, and she did not look at Jin-ho again. Chairman Sterling presented the forensic financial documentation. 2 years of evidence, asset repositioning, licensing restructuring, the shell company, the intellectual property transfer plan. She told the board that copies had already been provided to the SEC, that this meeting was now a matter of public legal record, that any board member who had knowingly participated in or facilitated any aspect of what the documents described should have their legal counsel available. The room was very quiet. Jin-ho stood. He looked at Maya. He said, low enough that only she could hear it, that she had destroyed everything. Maya looked at him. She said, "You destroyed it, Jin-ho. The morning you looked at a photograph of your newborn son and decided he was inconvenient." He had nothing to say to that, because there was nothing to say. It was simply true, and they both knew it. He walked out of the boardroom without another word. The doors closed behind him, and the room exhaled. Maya stood up. She said her name clearly. She said she was the legal wife of Jin-ho Sterling and the daughter of Dr. Arthur Vance. She said she was the chief structural designer on the Horizon Protocol and that she would like to present it to the board. Dr. Vance appeared on the large screen at the end of the room, arranged earlier that morning, the technology tested, the connection confirmed. He told the board that in 40 years of working in structural technology, he had not encountered thinking this forward. He told them he was offering his full technical partnership to Sterling Tech for its implementation. He said it was not a favour to his daughter. He said it because it was simply the best work he had encountered. For 40 minutes, Maya presented the future of Sterling Tech to a room full of people who had spent years looking through her. Every slide, every projection, every technical diagram, built from scratch in the hours before her son woke up. Built without the name, without the connections, without any of the things she could have used and had chosen not to. Just the work, standing on its own, asking to be evaluated on its own terms. The vote was unanimous. The motion to appoint Maya Vance Sterling as interim CEO of Sterling Tech passed without a single dissent. A board member whose name appeared on Jin-ho's list of contradictory promises made the motion himself. Perhaps out of guilt. Perhaps out of genuine recognition. Perhaps both. It didn't matter. The vote was the vote. Justice in real life does not look the way it looks in the stories we tell ourselves when we are the ones who have been wronged. It is not a single dramatic moment of reversal. It is not the villain weeping and the hero standing in golden light while everyone applauds. It is quieter than that, more complicated, and if it is done right, it costs the person delivering it something too. Maya went to Jinho's office alone. Security was waiting. His things were in boxes. He was sitting in the chair at his desk as if the chair itself could delay what was happening. She closed the door and stood across from him, and she did not perform triumph. She simply told him that Marcus had asked about him that morning, that his 4-year-old son, knowing almost nothing about what had happened in that boardroom, had wondered if his father was okay. Jinho looked at her when she said it, in a way he had not looked at her in years, as if something in his face had shifted back into a more honest arrangement. He told her he had known about the paternity test from the beginning, 4 years ago. He said it quietly, and he did not try to justify it. She told him she knew. He asked why she hadn't said so sooner. She said because she had kept hoping he would choose differently, that people can surprise you, that he had simply chosen not to. She told him the SEC investigation would determine his professional future, that the divorce proceedings would begin the following week, that she was requesting full physical custody with supervised visitation, that if he chose to show up for that, for Marcus, for the supervised hours, for the slow and unglamorous work of being a father to a child who had every reason to be angry at him, that was between him and Marcus, not her. She would not stand in the way of her son having a father if his father chose to be one. That was the line, the only one. He asked her if she was going to try to destroy him. She told him she had never wanted to destroy him. She told him she had wanted him to be a father to his son. She said he had chosen not to be. She said everything that came after that had been his choice. She turned to leave. He said her name. She stopped. She did not turn around. He said he was sorry. The silence that followed lasted long enough to be real. Then she said, "I know," and she walked out. She did not say she forgave him, because she was not there yet, and Maya Vance had spent too many years performing emotions she did not feel in order to make other people comfortable. She was finished with that. Forgiveness, when it came, would be real. Until then, she would carry the truth of what she actually felt and not apologize for its complexity. Secretary Park received a different response than she expected. No termination, no blacklist. 6 months in the mailroom, learning the company from the ground up. An invitation, not a guarantee, an invitation to demonstrate over time whether she was the person Jinho had made her into or the person she might choose to be. Maya told her directly that she was not interested in destroying people, that she was interested in building something worth working for, that the invitation stood. What Park chose to do with it was her own business. The afternoon light was long and golden when Maya stood in Marcus's hospital room doorway and watched her father, a man she had kept at a distance for 4 years out of a complicated mixture of shame and pride, sit beside her son's bed and read him a story. Marcus was leaning against his grandfather's arm with the total unself-conscious trust of a child who does not yet know how rare that kind of presence is. Chairman Sterling sat in the chair on the other side of the bed. She had brought flowers, real ones, not the corporate kind. She was holding Marcus's hand. Marcus asked Chairman Sterling if his daddy was a bad person. And Eleanor Sterling, who had run a billion-dollar empire for 30 years and made hard decisions every single day of those 30 years, thought carefully before she answered. She told him that his daddy had made some very bad choices, that was different from being a bad person, that people could make bad choices and still choose differently later, that sometimes we wait and see. Marcus said his mama said the same thing. Chairman Sterling said that his mama was a very wise woman. Marcus said he knew. He said she was the smartest person he knew. And Eleanor Sterling smiled with her whole face in a way that the people who worked for her would not have recognized. 3 months after the shareholders' meeting, Sterling Tech's stock had risen 41%. The Horizon Protocol was in full development phase. Dr. Arthur Vance had relocated to Chicago, officially as lead technical advisor, unofficially as a grandfather with 4 years of bedtime stories to catch up on, and a grandson who had apparently inherited his specific gift for asking questions that had no easy answers. The SEC investigation into Jin Ho's shell company was ongoing. Vivian Cho had released a public statement that her legal team had characterized as a masterpiece of corporate accountability. 7 board members had voluntarily recused themselves pending review, 2 had resigned, and Maya Vance, 23 years old, interim CEO of one of the most powerful companies in North America, chief architect of a development framework that 3 industry publications had already called visionary, was sitting at her kitchen table at 4:47 in the morning with her laptop open and her coffee going cold beside her. Some things don't change. The 4 a.m. hours were still hers. The quiet before the world started asking things of her was still where she did her best thinking. She had just recently begun to understand that this was not a symptom of survival mode. It was simply who she was. The woman who worked in the dark and then showed up in the light with the thing she had built. Marcus appeared in the doorway in his dinosaur pajamas with his stuffed bear tucked under one arm and a very serious expression on his small face. He told her she had said she was going to stop doing this. She told him she had said she would try. He told her to come to bed. She closed the laptop. She did not save anything dramatically. She did not have a moment of cinematic realization. She just closed the laptop and stood up and crossed the kitchen to where her son was waiting, and she took his hand and she went to bed. Because the work would be there in the morning. The meeting would be there. The empire would be there. But this small, warm hand in hers, this boy who had come into the world in the middle of the hardest years of her life and made every one of those years worth the wait. This was the actual thing. Everything else was just what she did in the hours before he woke up. A week later, she stood on the rooftop of Sterling Tech at the end of a long day. Chairman Sterling joined her. They stood together and looked at the city, and neither of them said anything for a while. Then Chairman Sterling asked her how it felt. Maya thought about it honestly. She said it felt smaller than she had expected. The view and the victory both. Chairman Sterling asked her what she had expected. Maya said she wasn't sure, that she had spent so long imagining what it would feel like to be seen, to be believed, to be given credit for the work she had actually done, and now that she had all of it, she found that what she actually wanted was simpler than any of it. She wanted to do good work, build something real, and get home before Marcus went to sleep. Chairman Sterling was quiet for a moment. Then she said that she had spent 30 years watching people chase power, that the ones who destroyed things and the ones who built things could not always be distinguished by their ambition or their intelligence or even their talent. The distinction, in her experience, came down to a single question. What did they want the power for? The ones who wanted it for itself always eventually hollowed out whatever they touched. The ones who wanted it for something outside themselves, something they were protecting, something they were building for other people, those were the ones who left something real behind. She said that what separated the people who deserved power from the people who chased it was exactly what Maya had just described. They stood together in comfortable silence as the city lights came on below them, one by one, until the skyline was fully lit and the night had settled in around them completely. 2 women who had each been underestimated by the same man. One who had built an empire. One who was just beginning. Maya Vance had never wanted to be the billionaire CEO's wife. She had never wanted the title. She had never wanted the power, the prestige, the corner office, the board's unanimous vote, or her name on the door of the 47th floor. She had wanted to be seen. For her mind, for her work, for the love she had been pouring into a child alone in the dark for 4 years. For the 4 a.m. hours nobody else knew about. For the proposals submitted before the sun came up. For the woman she was when nobody was watching. She got all of it. Not because she had been married to the right person, not because of her father's name, or her mother-in-law's power, or the SEC investigation, or the shareholders' vote. She got all of it because she had refused At every point where the easier choice would have been to disappear, she had simply refused to go. The real truth, the one underneath all the drama and the betrayal and the boardroom and the documents and the paternity test and the shell company and everything else, the truth was never about Jin-Ho Sterling. It was about how close Maya Vance came to accepting a life that had been designed to make her small. And the Tuesday morning in November, when she looked at a suspension notice and a sick baby and 4 years of swallowed pride, and she decided, quietly and finally, and without any fanfare at all, that she was done. She was 23 years old. She had a son who asked good questions, and a father who would come home, and a grandmother who held her son's hand in hospital rooms. She had work that was genuinely hers, built in the stolen hours of a life that had tried to take everything. And she had the particular freedom that only comes to people who have carried a secret for years and finally put it down. She was just getting started. And the next chapter, the one where Jin-Ho Sterling asks to see his son for the first time under supervised conditions, where the SEC investigation takes an unexpected turn, where a board member whose name is buried in that file surfaces with information that threatens to reopen everything. That chapter is darker still, and it begins exactly where this one ends. In the quiet, before the sun comes up, at the kitchen table, with the work. If you stayed until the end of this story, then you already know why it matters. Maya Vance is 23 years old, and she is standing at the beginning of something. But beginnings are only interesting if you follow them forward. In the next chapter, Jin-Ho Sterling makes a request. A quiet one. Not for the company. Not for the shares. Not for anything that belongs to him. He asks for an hour with his son. And what Maya decides in that moment, and how Marcus responds when he finally sees his father face to face, is one of the most complicated things this story has left to tell. If you want to be there for it, subscribe now and turn on your notifications. The next chapter drops this week. And before you go, I want to know what you think. Was Maya right to leave the door open for Jin-Ho to be in Marcus's life? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Yes or no, and tell me why. And if you know someone who needed this story today, someone carrying something heavy in the quiet, share this video with them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is show them a story where the woman who was supposed to disappear simply decided not to.